right, let's move along to our guy making his first appearance here. He's got a very big, huge to live up to because everyone's talking up Jake Riepma, who we're introducing to you. Locked On Lions 105.3, the fan down in Dallas. Jake, thank you for making time. First off, appreciate you coming on CHGO Bears.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. And no need to apologize. I was like the Michael Jackson gift there, just having the popcorn as you guys were arguing, because it wasn't that long ago we were doing the exact same thing with the Lions. And frankly, I don't know what the other Lions fans might tell you. I'm still pinching myself because of the years and years we endured. This has been still like I'm trying to pinch myself that this is really happening and what's going on with Detroit.
Yeah, Jake, isn't it nice to be talking about a playoff game and a bye week? And I guess your only issue now is that other teams like ours are trying to poach your coaches.
Yeah, I guess it comes with the territory. And obviously we dealt with it a little bit last year with Ben Johnson. And depending on who you ask, he might have gone about it in the wrong way. And maybe he learned a little bit about the head coaching process that time around. And with all the more success that the Lions have had, and especially the offense and the numbers that they put on for the vast majority of this season. I mean, Sunday night against Minnesota in the first half, we won't talk too much about that. But as far as both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn just continuing to be, put their resumes out there this season, you can't say enough about how much they've done. So obviously with the continuously changing landscape of the NFL, there's going to be a lot of organizations lining up at the door to offer them an opportunity.
Well, and how much of is there any credit for the offense's success from Dan Campbell? Because I think for a lot of Bears fans, they're like, well, Dan Campbell's just the culture guy, but Ben Johnson runs the whole offense. And I think a point I've tried to make to fans is that I think that Dan Campbell, because of his attention to detail and emphasis on, the culture that they've built there, that also has a lot to do with the success that they have, going on that offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with Dan Campbell, you get the sound bites and the press conferences and you're biting kneecaps. And that is, a lot of what he's built the culture around. But to insinuate that Dan Campbell is not an X's and O's guy as well, I think is rather insulting. And you look at his time even before he became a head coach when he was an interim with the Miami Dolphins. I mean, he righted that ship back then. And I thought it was kind of surprising that he didn't get the opportunity to continue with Miami. And obviously the Lions are the benefit of that. But obviously there's a CEO component to it of running the organization, building the culture, getting the right guys. There's the management side of it with what Brad Holmes has done as the general manager and how well they've drafted. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, and everybody brought out the screenshots after the Sunday night game where the Lions were getting a D grade for drafting Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. And so you have to give a lot of credit to the front office and ownership. I mean, the number of shows we did on 97 Win the Ticket before I moved to Dallas about sell the team. I mean, Barstool made shirts with Martha Ford's face on it to sell the team. And so there's always, when you're losing and you're not having success, the easy finger pointing is to ownership. But I remember when Martha Ford came out and said, she gives Dan Campbell the vote of confidence. This was 2 years ago. And things really did turn around after that. And the belief in ownership, the belief in Brad Holmes and and even Chris Spielman and the fingerprints he's had on the building of this roster, all the way down to the head coaching job that Dan Campbell's done. And then that trickles down to, yes, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn from a coordinating standpoint as well.
Hey, Jake, take your best stab at what could or should the Bears do if they really want to impress Ben Johnson? What do you think he's looking for?
What was funny about that is a couple of weeks ago, that report came out that Ben Johnson wants to be wowed in the interview process. And obviously I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I think you can use the term control. He wants to have his fingerprints on it. And for as much credit as we give Dan Campbell, for having his fingerprints on the Lions as a whole, make no mistake about it, that offense runs through Ben Johnson, and the dynamic and the relationship he's built with Jared Goff to resurrect his career. you think about that comes into play as well. What kind of relationship he can have with his quarterback, with the Bears. Obviously that's what we're talking about right now with Caleb Williams. I mean, the opportunity to groom Caleb Williams to be, one of the upper echelon quarterbacks in the National Football League and to be an all-time great. You look at how he's been able to resurrect Jared Goff's career, and it's only been 1 year for Caleb Williams. Obviously, there's going to be some rookie growing pains, but that's got to be appealing for Ben Johnson. And I honestly, and this is as Detroit of a take as I can give you, I feared the Chicago Bears entering this season. Everything that they did to load up on offense, and you guys are probably so sick of hearing this, but the potential that was on that Chicago Bears offense, and even though Caleb Williams was a rookie, I legitimately thought they were contenders to win the NFC North. And maybe that just shows you that I'm not plugged in enough to the way things work in Chicago. But I honestly think there's still so many components to a scary, scary team, especially on the offensive end with the Chicago Bears, that has to be appealing with Ben Johnson. And then the dynamic with the general manager, with Ryan Poles, and can he and Ben Johnson work together? I heard you guys talking about that a little bit, and I think that is so crucial if there's chemistry there. And sometimes chemistry has to be organic. It's not something that you can force. And you look at the Raiders firing their general manager, and maybe all of a sudden Vegas is a more appealing destination for Ben Johnson because it is the definition of a fresh start and you are starting from ground zero there. Whereas in Chicago, there's a few other moving parts and a couple other layers that have already been pre-established.
Yeah, Greg, I don't know if you heard this, but the Raiders fired Tom Telesco.
I did hear. Did you hear that, Jake? Tom Telesco.
Jake, okay, so I don't think there's any debate that Ben Johnson would be good for the Bears from an offensive standpoint, but they're hiring him to be the head coach. Do you think Ben Johnson, from what you know about him, will be a good head coach?
Absolutely not. He's going to be a terrible head coach. Nobody should hire him. He should stay as the offensive coordinator for the rest of his career. I mean, he's happy in Michigan. I know he lives in a beautiful suburb, Canton, Michigan. His kids go to gymnastics class. Everything is great. Why would you ever? But no, obviously being a little facetious. I think he's got that factor, that it factor, and you don't really truly know until there's, when push comes to shove and there's some adversity that you face as the head coach, and all of a sudden it's 100% your responsibility. And it's as a coordinator, there's no place to, you don't go to a meeting room thinking, how can we put up 50 points this week? You go to a meeting room in front of a team saying, this is crisis management. How can we win the game? And the perspective changes. And until you're, I guess, quote unquote, thrown in the fire, there's really no way to evaluate how he'll perform in that role. Now, there's certainly cases you can look to and say, this guy failed or this guy was successful. Obviously, the Sean McVay, the Kyle Shanahan's, the list goes on. That's what you're hoping for in a best case scenario. But there's plenty of instances in which guys are just good coordinators. You see it on offense, you see it on defense. And, I joke, but I do think that Ben Johnson has for lack of a better term, the stones, maybe not quite Dan Gamble style, going for it on fourth down in your own 20-yard line and leading the NFL in fake punts for the last 2 years and everything else that comes with Dan Campbell. But I think that inevitably rubs off on him in that style of aggressiveness and being a leader of men. He's learned quite a bit from Dan Campbell, and you would expect him to take that to wherever he ends up, if he does end up going somewhere to be the head coach.
Well, he is going to end up in Chicago, and your worst fears are going to be realized. But I do, just before we get to that point, I am curious, from last year's offseason, there was some rumors about Ben Johnson may not have interviewed well, or that he was going to go to Washington and then decided not to and didn't tell them until the last second. So was there anything within the interview process last year that would lead us to believe that something might not go right this year?
As far as, mistakes that he made, I don't think you'll see that this time through. I think you really will see it be Ben Johnson's choice. And maybe that's a little bit of a blown up and overplayed cliche, but he's interviewing these teams as much as they're interviewing them. And again, that's a cliche, but I don't think the whole there's only 32 of these jobs, you got to take a head coaching job, I don't think that resonates with Ben Johnson. I don't think he feels that pressure, and the proof or his resume in everything that he's accomplished as the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, I think does enough. And maybe that again comes across as a biased Locked On Lions guy and studying this team and following him as closely as I have. But I don't know how, I mean, you would have to really, really botch an interview and show signs of all different kinds of red flags for a team not being willing or being cautious to take a risk on hiring Ben Johnson as a head coach.
So real quick then, was there anything from what you read or what you gathered with your Lions coverage that he didn't interview well?
No. And I don't think, with the virtual interviews, obviously on Friday, he's got a couple of virtual interviews and then a couple more on Saturday between Jacksonville, the Raiders, Chicago. And that just shows that, with the first round bye, obviously the schedule allows for that for Ben Johnson to be able to dive in head first. And I don't know how much, and the Patriots, sorry, that's the other team, but I don't know how much you really put as far as stock into a virtual interview until you get into the meat and potatoes of the process and you have them to your facilities and you see them interact with players, with management, with the front office and everything. And part of that too, if you look internally, is what do you value as an organization? Do you value, if you're the Chicago Bears, do you value if he can walk into a room and have the charisma to command a room, or do you value if his offense leads every statistical category and he's resurrected Jared Goff's career? There's different components to a resume as when you're taking that step from a coordinator to a head coach. And I don't see any red flags of Ben Johnson interviewing poorly or doing anything that wouldn't make him a very, very attractive candidate.
This might be a layup question, but we're talking about Ben a lot. We haven't mentioned a ton of Aaron Glenn here. Jake, I'm giving you an expansion team. You have no players. You're hiring the head coach. You can have Johnson or Glenn. Is that close in your mind, or is that all Johnson all day?
Well, I don't want to get too, nerdy and granular with the parameters of this fun exercise, but it's Ben Johnson. I think the Lions as a team, yes, Sunday night and most recently the defense was great, but they're not 15-2 without Ben Johnson. And I know Aaron Glenn's dealt with a ton of injuries, and Aaron Glenn has the resume that he played in the league, and that resonates with a lot of guys. But schematically, what Ben Johnson as an offensive genius has compiled in the body of work over his time as the offensive coordinator with the Lions outweighs what Aaron Glenn has done as the defensive coordinator. And this is no knock on Aaron Glenn, because again, it's very, very close, and there's no wrong answer to this hypothetical proposition here. But with Aaron Glenn, the Lions defense has not been good when Aaron Glenn's been the defensive coordinator at times. And yes, there's a lot of factors. And even this year, there has been some times where you look at the defense and they couldn't stop a nosebleed. And you're just wondering, okay, can they do enough? Maybe force a turnover here, or the offense gets the ball the last possession of the game. And I heard you guys talking about the Lions 8-8 season, or whatever it was, 9-8 season, where they beat Green Bay on Sunday night and ended Aaron Rodgers' time with the Packers. That was a season that had a lot of ups and downs, and they fired Aubrey Pleasant as the defensive backs coach earlier in that season, and a lot of people felt like he was the scapegoat for Aaron Glenn. And so it's not like Aaron Glenn has had this overwhelming run of success. Is he hot right now? Absolutely. Does he deserve a head coaching job? Absolutely. Would he make a great head coach? Absolutely. And I'm going to stop asking myself questions and answering them. They're both viable candidates and they're both slam dunk hires, but I'd give the nod to Ben Johnson over Aaron Glenn.
Jake, if Johnson leaves the Lions, what happens with the offense? What happens, like, when you guys have that discussion? Who takes over? Where do they go?
Will they die?
Yeah, yeah. We might just cancel the rest of as an organization. No, you hope that Mark Brunell would stick around. There's a lot of rumors that Ben Johnson would be taking him with wherever he goes. Obviously, I used the fact that Aaron Glenn played in the league. Mark Brunell the same way, has a lot of pull with players, and if he's ready to call plays as the offensive coordinator, that'd be one area that I lean, because I think the part of what's made this Lions team so successful is the continuity and the culture too. I know that's an overblown phrase that we use in sports now that's so important, but the culture is so vital to the success of a team like the Lions. And from the top down, Dan Campbell and company have built that. So the less turnover, the better. And if Mark Brunell, I think he's ready to take that next step as a play caller and to be the offensive coordinator.
Well, you've got Hank Fraley interviewing to be the offensive coordinator in Seattle right now. That got reported this morning. And I know that's somebody that Bears fans had named maybe would be a good fit to be the offensive coordinator behind Ben Johnson if Ben Johnson's kind of the incumbent play caller, right? And you have a guy with offensive line experience. What did you make of, I don't know if you had a chance to see the Jacksonville 1010 XL radio hit with Greg Huntington, where he talked about his relationship with Mark Brunell and kind of peeled back the onion about how he wants to come down to Jacksonville. What did you make of that? And I'm assuming Mark Brunell probably didn't want that out there.
Yeah, it rubbed a little bit people the wrong way, I guess. And maybe not, that's a little bit too strong of a way to put it, but I kind of did you get the kind of head nod and you wonder how much substance is really to all of that and how, how substantial and how true that really is. And only Mark Brunell can answer that. And that's why the Jacksonville conversation is interesting as a whole, because depending on who you ask, Trevor Lawrence might not be the guy. And maybe Ben Johnson and Mark Brunell think that's an appealing project and they can fix Trevor Lawrence. And Jacksonville all of a sudden can be a team. But even at its, and maybe this is my Detroit bias getting in the way, but even at it, you do the best case scenario conversation. What are you getting out of becoming the offensive coordinator in Jacksonville? And other than his ties that he played there, yeah, sure. But you got a pretty good thing going in Detroit right now. I think the potential for failure or the potential for everything that comes with being involved with Jacksonville Jaguars organization, that risk far outweighs the reward.
Final thing for me real quick. I'm sorry, guys. So when my only hesitation with a guy like Ben Johnson, where you say he reclamated Jared Goff's career, well, Jared Goff did go to a Super Bowl, with the Rams, and obviously he's playing the best of his career with Detroit. He's more of a veteran quarterback that Ben Johnson had to work with. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence down in Jacksonville, again, a veteran. Like, how much can I trust, as much as Ben Johnson is a great play caller, has a great offense, top 5 in the league last 3 years, that I know that he can develop Caleb Williams, who still has a learning curve to go?
Yeah, and that's a good question. It's a fair, I guess, hesitation with someone like Ben Johnson. But I also would really put a lot on the line to say, if you don't want Ben Johnson doing that with Caleb Williams, then who do you want? And with it only being 1 year that Caleb Williams has been in the league, and you guys could probably answer this better than me, but I mean, watching his highlights and everything and how he's progressed, obviously it's a roller coaster as a rookie, but there's so much potential there. And he's drafted number 1 for a reason. And the fact that he has the weapons around him, he has the tools to be successful. And maybe Ben Johnson is just that missing piece to take to the next level. Based on what I've seen from Ben Johnson over his time as the offensive coordinator, I would be writing him a blank check if I were the Chicago Bears, because I think 100% he can develop and help Caleb Williams take that next step and take what he's already shown, which has been, there's been plenty to be really excited about. And now there's more to it in developing an offense. You got to have guys to protect him and so on and so forth. And what Ben Johnson has done with the Lions, I think really shows that it's certainly something he's capable of doing.
Hopefully one day we can point back to this interview and say everything you said is right and the Bears ended up landing.
They're going to lose Ben Johnson. They're going to lose Aaron Glenn. So this is your last chance, Detroit. When you lose those guys, you're going to go back to your loser ways. Thank
The
you
only
for coming on.
thing- No, the only thing I got to say, though, I heard some Northwestern shade in one of the, and no pun intended, with their Shady Rays read, but
Yeah.
what are we doing there? Go Cats. It wasn't that long ago.
Oh,
I was
no.
a student on the sidelines watching Hogue as the sideline reporter carrying the cameras, and I was just a college kid. And I was too afraid to go up to Adam and introduce myself and say, I want to be you someday. But I don't stand for the Northwestern shade being thrown. Unbelievable.
Now, all right, this is Jake. I thought I liked you, but now when you're gonna gas up Hogue, A, that's a big miss.
Well-
B, your Northwestern affinity. Carm is an obnoxious Northwestern fan. Like I don't know.
obnoxious, I'm
This is not a
classy
great way
cat.
to finish.
Jake,
Wait,
first of all, you should have come up and said hi. But second, you know,
You probably had that resting Hogue face.
I probably did. That's on me. That's on me. There it is. That's the face.
Yeah, is that the look he was giving you, Jake?
You
when
probably
you
saw
thought
that.
about
You're
going?
like, he's too intimidating.
Intimidating as hell, man.
I gotta work on that. Sorry, man.
No.
But
Those were some fun years, man. I mean, I know Clayton Thorson isn't walking through the doors right now, but Preston Stone, look out.
That's right.
yeah,
And we're focusing on Michigan State on Sunday, and getting back to the tournament for the third straight year. Cat basketball is carrying the mail right now.
Oh my gosh,
Jake,
that's saying
see,
something.
you know this then, because inside Northwestern circles, the thing they talk about the most is, you know, how much better the program was when I was on the sidelines.
Well, and for the record, I did get to do sidelines when Hogue left, and then and I was on the sidelines in Ireland, and they went 1-0, and then they fired me, and then they lost every game the rest of the season. For the record, didn't really get fired; just kind of got slid over. But
I
you know,
remember watching that game in Ireland thinking, look out, Big Ten championship, here we go.
Nebraska was a thing. All right, hey, good luck down in Dallas. Watch out for my guy Sean Sharif, who's been on the show.
Yeah, Sean's my guy. I love that guy. He's awesome. Although, here's Sean Sharif for you. Hey, man, you got to stop doing so much locked on. You're a Dallas guy, man. You're doing too much locked on.
Just tell him that you'll try to do that and not spend as much time winning a mixed doubles championship in tennis in high school, which is not a thing, except somehow he's on the one high school mixed doubles tennis team, which is actually, I love him for that. Hey, we took too much of your time, Jake. Thanks so much for being here, man. Great stuff.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We all silly like the mayor.